So we are in this chapter, chapter 16, titled King Chitraketu Meets the Supreme Lord. So I'll quickly go over the 8 verses that we have covered so far in this chapter. So this is a very philosophical chapter, and it also has a very practical lesson also. I'd like to title this particular section as How to Convert or How to Turn Pain into Purpose, which is what happens in this chapter. There is a lot of pain at the beginning of this chapter, and towards the end, you will see that everyone has a clear purpose of turning towards the Supreme Lord. So, how does this happen in this one small chapter? How does it change from pain to purpose? So, in 6:16:1, can one of the co-hosts admit people, please? Okay. So this is a section, as I was saying, it's about how to turn pain into purpose. In the beginning of this chapter, it starts with pain and it ends with everyone having a purpose. So in the beginning of this chapter, in 6:16:1, we see that Narad Muni, there's a lot of pain actually. A son has died and everybody's lamenting, crying. So by mystic power, Narad Muni brought dead son into the vision of all lamenting relatives and spoke as follows. So in text 2 and 3, Narad Muni is directly addressing the jiva or the soul of Harshashoka. Harshashoka is the soul, and Narad Muni is addressing Harshashoka, and he's saying, "O living entity, your parents, your friends, your relatives are in grief because of your passing away. You had untimely death, so re-enter your body and enjoy the remaining life with friends, relatives, throne, opulence, etc." So here is a very rare situation with the very mystic power of Narad Muni. He's bringing a jiva, asking a jiva to enter the body again so that he can enjoy with his friends, relatives, family, and so on. And then the jiva enters the body of Harshashoka and starts speaking by the mystic potency of Narad Muni, of course. And then he starts giving these very high level of philosophy, wherein he says, I transmigrate according to my karma. In which birth are these my parents? No one is my parents. How can I accept them? And then he says, no one is permanently related in this material world. And then in verse 6, the living entity's transmigration is like gold's changes in continuously in transactions through purchase and sale. Like how money goes from one person to another, just like that, a living entity's body also keeps transmigrating from one body to another, one body to another. Just like how $1 bill goes from one hand to another. So that's the analogy that's used here. And then 16.7, in the material world, because of the relationships, we will become possessive. In reality, both are temporary. So the material world is temporary, and the relationships we have in this material world are also temporary. So these are all very heavy verses. And then in the last verse that we read last week, the eternal living entity has no material identity. It gets connected to parents through perishable bodies. So today we will continue reading about the qualities of living entity, and then in the 10th verse we'll continue to elaborate further on the qualities of living entity, and then in the 11th verse the qualities of the Lord are mentioned. So the qualities of living entity are mentioned, and the qualities of the Lord are mentioned. So with this, I'm going to share my screen, the Veda base. Okay. So the readers are here. Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu, would you like to read first?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah. एष नित्यो वयः सूक्ष्म एष सर्वाश्रयस्वदृक् आत्ममाया गुणैर्विश्व आत्मानं सृजते प्रभुः. Translation: the living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. In this verse, the philosophy of Achintya Bheda Bhed, simultaneous oneness and difference, is described. The living entity is eternal, Nitya, like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But the difference is that the Supreme Lord is the greatest, no one being equal to or greater than him. Whereas the living entity is Sukshma or extremely small. The Shastra describes that the magnitude of the living entity is 1/10,000 the size of the tip of a hair. The Supreme Lord is all-pervading, Andantarastha Parmanu Chayantarastham. Relatively, if the living entity is accepted as the smallest, there should naturally be inquiry about the greatest. The greatest is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the smallest is the living entity. Another peculiar characteristics of the Jiva is that he becomes covered by Maya. Atma Maya Guna is prone to being covered by the Supreme Lord's illusory energy. The living entity is responsible for his conditional life in the material world, and therefore he is described as Prabhu, the Master. If he likes, he can come to this material world, and if he likes, he can return home back to Godhead. Because he wanted to enjoy this material world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him a material body through the agency of material energy, as the Lord himself says in Bhagavad Gita. Ishvara sarva bhutanam riddhe Arjuna tishtati brahman sarva bhutani yantra rudhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjun, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The Supreme Lord gives the a living entity a chance to enjoy in this material world as he desires, but he openly expresses his own desire that the living entity give up all material aspirations, fully surrender unto him, and return home back to Godhead. The living entity is the smallest Sukshma. Jiva Goswami says in this connection that the living entity within the body is extremely difficult for materialistic scientists to find, although we understand from authorities that the living entity is within the body. The body is different from the living entity.
Hare Krishna. Would you like to share something, Vamshita Gopal?
Yes, Prabhu. I think this purport is like it's giving the very nice summary and very detailed summary of like our basic philosophy of like the Vaishnavism or Dvaitvad, that how how Jiva is Tatastha Shakti of the Lord is same in quality but very small, Anu, very small compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that's why he can be affected by the uh, external energy of the Lord. And this purport and translation also clarifies that all the material bodies, the basis for those is the soul. Because of soul, they are active, and and just the soul, that small soul, is giving life to those bodies, and depending on karma, and then this soul goes from one body to another body. So and then soul is this Achinta. The purport also talks about Achinta Bhedabhed Tattva, that how it's simultaneously one with the Lord and separate from the Lord. It's simultaneously one when it comes to quality, but it's different when it is separated part of the Lord, and it is eternally individual, and it is and in terms of quantity, like we are like a drop of ocean and Krishna is like the ocean. So I think this gives like very much clarity about that how we are small part of the Lord and how we are supposed to worship Him.
Wonderful. Anybody else wants to share anything, Prabhu? Thank you, Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu, so nicely summarizing the verse and the philosophy of Achinta Beda Beda Tattva. So, yeah. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything else on this verse? Okay. So once Srila Prabhupada was asked when he came to the US that Srila Prabhupada, why have you come to the US? One reporter asked Srila Prabhupada, why have you come to the US? So immediately Srila Prabhupada responded and said, why have you come to the US? Then he said, because there is a lot of opportunities here. And so then Srila Prabhupada said, you have come to take, I have come to give. So that is an Acharya. An Acharya always comes not to take, but to give Krishna consciousness. And in this chapter, Angira Muni and Narad Muni come in this particular situation to give Krishna consciousness. And that is the nature of a sadhu. The nature of an advanced soul is that they come and share things. So that is the first thing I wanted to mention. And the second thing I want to mention is, in this particular purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions, because he wanted to enjoy this material world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gave him a material body through the agency of the material energy. So does that mean that we should not own anything in this material world? So it is said that it's not that you don't own anything, you should not be owned by anything. So I'll repeat that. It's not that you don't own anything. It's, of course, it's okay to own a car, it's okay to own a house, everything, but you should not become so attached that those things that you own you. So you should not be owned by anything. That is detachment, actually. So in this section that we are reading, several verses, you will find the concepts of renunciation, of detachment, and so on. But the point is, detachment is very internal. It is not external. You can own things, you can have things in the material world, but internally, you must be detached. And you must keep on elevating your consciousness so that these things don't affect you anymore at all. You're on a different plane, actually. You're on a different, it's called a premier league of love, you can say. And in that level, when you're at that level, the things of this material world don't affect you at all. They don't even attract you anymore. And when you come to that stage, then you can say that you're in a very advanced consciousness, state of advanced consciousness. So just wanted to add that. Nobody has any thoughts or comments, we can proceed. Jagannath Gopal Prabhu, would you like to read the next verse?
Yes.
If you're busy, you can read later also, let me know.
No. I'll read. It's okay. Yeah. Verse 10. Naya asyasti priya kaschin na priya swaparo piva ekah sarva dhyam drashta kartranam gunadoshayoho. Translation. For this living entity, no one is dear, nor is anyone unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. He is one without a second. In other words, he is not affected by friends and enemies, well-wishers or mischief mongers. He is only an observer, a witness of different qualities of men. Purport. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. As explained in a previous verse, the living entity has the same qualities as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he has them in minute quantities because he is a small particle, Sukshma, whereas the Supreme Lord is all-pervading and great. For the Supreme Lord, there are no friends, enemies, or relatives, for he is completely free from all the disqualifications of ignorance that characterize the conditioned souls. On the other hand, he is extremely kind and favorable to his devotees, and he is not at all satisfied with persons who are envious of his devotees. as the Lord himself confirms in the Bhagavad Gita. Samoham sarva bhuteshu name dveshosti na priyah ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya maite teshu chapya aham. I envy no one, nor am I partial to anyone. I am equal to all. But whoever renders service unto me in devotion is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. The Supreme Lord has no enemy or friend, but he is inclined toward a devotee who always engages in his devotional service. Similarly, elsewhere in the Gita, 16.19, the Lord says, Tanaham dvishatha kruran samsareshu naradhaman kshipamya ajasram ashubhan asurishva eva yonishu. Those who are envious and mischievous, who are the lowest among men, are cast by me into the ocean of material existence, into various demoniac species of life. The Lord is extremely antagonistic towards those who are envious of his devotees. To protect his devotees, the Lord sometimes has to kill their enemies. For example, to protect Prahlad Maharaj, the Lord had to kill his enemy Hiranyakashipu, although Hiranyakashipu attained salvation because of being killed by the Lord. Since the Lord is the witness of everyone's activities, he witnesses the actions of the enemies of his devotees, and he is inclined to punish them. In other cases, however, he simply witnesses what the living entities do and gives the results of one's sinful or pious actions. This is a very interesting verse, 9.29, because in the first two lines, Krishna is saying, I'm equal to everybody, I am not partial, and things like that. And in the very next part of the verse, he's saying, no, but the devotee is dear to my devotee is dear to me, right? So in one sense, if we look at it from a very external lens, then we'll kind of see that hey, Krishna is contradicting himself here. So actually, he's not exactly contradicting himself. He's just being actually in being dear to his devotees. In the devotees being dear to Krishna, that is his way of reciprocating with the love that they want to give to Krishna. So love is reciprocated with love. Hate is reciprocated with hate. Not exactly hate, but hate is reciprocated with tough love, which sometimes seems as hate in the external world. So this is a very interesting verse, and it is often quoted by Prabhupada in his purports and many devotees also. So, yeah, I mean, here, let me see, no one is dear. Yeah. For this living entity, no one is dear, nor anyone is unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. This is in the translation. He is one without a second, or in other words, he is not affected by friends and enemies, well-wishers or mischief mongers. He is only an observer, a witness of the different qualities of men. So this living entity here, it's referring to the spirit soul. The spirit soul in reality is actually aloof, is in reality not really affected by all these externalities unless the living entity chooses to do so. So, but the living entity constitutionally is not really affected by any of these things. So, and it's a very tough thing to realize actually, and of course the best way to realize, as mentioned everywhere and in the Bhagavad Gita also at different places, is we can try to detach from these things. We can try to use the process of neti neti. We can try to use the process of no, this is not me. I see Aishwarya, I say this is not. Aishwarya is not mine. I see Prithu, I say this, he is not mine. I see my car, I say this is not me. I keep neti doing this. No, this is not me. This is not me. This is not me. But that process is very tedious. Krishna himself says in the Gita, klesho adhikataras tesham avyakta asakta chetasam. So this through this neti process, one usually aspires for the avyakta, the unmanifested aspect of Krishna, or the Brahman. And Krishna is saying that this process is actually full of kleshas, full of difficulties. But on the other hand, for bhakti, he says this is susukham kartum avyayam. It is Rajavidya Rajaguhyam Pavitramidam Uttamam Pratyakshaavagamam Dharmam Susukham Kartum Avyayam. So it is not only the king of all knowledge, king of all secrets, it is not only the purest, Pratyakshaavagamam, it does not just give direct experience of the absolute truth, but above all these things, it is also joyfully performed. So that is something that Krishna says in the Gita. And so the other way to detach ourselves is to be attached to something higher. So that is the sense of purpose that you were talking about, Prabhuji, in the beginning. We can rise beyond the pains of the world by having a sense of purpose. So, and not only the pains, even we have to sometimes rise beyond the pleasures as well, because even pleasures have the binding potency. In fact, they have more of a binding potency than the pains. So in order to rise beyond both pleasure and pain, we need to serve Krishna. Today I was hearing a clip of Maharaj where he says the purpose of the material world is not to get into the cycle of papa and punya. The purpose of the material world is to facilitate the turning of a spirit soul towards Krishna, something like that. That is the main purpose of the material world. The purpose of the material world is, it might seem as punishment and reward in one sense, but the deeper purpose of the material world is actually rectification of our consciousness, rectification of our desires, and a redirection of our consciousness and desires towards the love for God. So like that, we can see that. And then here Krishna is also, Prabhupada is writing in a purport how Krishna protects his devotees. It is a very nice, sublime thing that is there in the path of bhakti, that Krishna will break his own word, but he'll make sure that his devotee is protected. That's what happened in case of Arjuna when Bhishma was about to kill him. Krishna picked up the chariot wheel, and he charged towards Bhishma to kill him. So although he had, in one sense, before the war, he had said that I won't pick up any weapons, but he broke his promise so that his devotee's promise, Name Bhakta Pranashyati. Arjuna, he tells Arjuna that you promise to the world that my devotee will never vanquish, right? One might wonder, why is Krishna telling Arjuna to declare to the world, right? Krishna could have himself declared that I will always protect my devotees, which he says also. But he tells Arjuna also to say that, I declare to the whole world that I protect my devotees always. My devotees will never vanquish. So the deeper meaning there is that Krishna will sometimes break his own word, but Krishna will not let his devotees' word be broken. So in that sense, Krishna will never break the word that his pure devotee Arjuna gave to the world, that Krishna's devotee will never vanquish. So like that, so many examples in the Shastras we see where Krishna protected his devotees in a very nice way. And here also Prabhupada is hinting to the fact that although the killing of Krishna to protect his devotees might seem ghastly in one sense, but it is actually even for the benefit of the person who gets killed. Because like in case of Hiranyakashipu, when he got killed, he attained salvation. Similarly, in case of Shishupal, when he was killed by Krishna, everybody there saw the spirit soul spark within Shishupal, ascending to the higher worlds. And similarly, it is said that those who all died in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, seeing Krishna, they also attained salvation. So we can see that the absoluteness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is in love. That is the absolute principle that is there. And whatever the Lord does in the material world, which is externally also, it might look like suffering, but it is actually an expression of his love, because he wants us to turn towards him. So that is the ultimate purpose. So like that, we can understand. So that's all. I took a lot of tangents. Sorry.
Wonderful, Prabhu. It was so nice listening to everything that you said. Yeah, brilliant points that you made. Thank you for sharing everything. Yeah, you covered this verse very well. Thank you. We can go to the next verse. Kameshwar Prabhu, are you available to read? Nupur is not here. Or if anybody else, any other Matajis would like to read? So I see Lekha Mataji.
Yeah, I can read.
Megha, okay, please.
Sorry, Prabhu, I'm actually driving, so I'm not able to read.
No problem, no problem. Yeah, we have Megha Mataji reading. Thank you, Lekha, for letting us.
Okay, sorry.
Na datta atma hi gunam, na dosham, na kriya phalam, udasinavad asina paravar drig ishvara. The Supreme Lord Atma, the creator of cause and effect, does not accept the happiness and distress that result from fruitive actions. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body, and because he has no material body, he is always neutral. The living entities, being part and parcel of the Lord, possess his qualities in a minute quantity. Therefore, one should not be affected by lamentation. Purport. The conditioned soul has friends and enemies. He is affected by the good qualities and the faults of his position. The Supreme Lord, however, is always transcendental because he is the Ishvara, the Supreme Controller. He is not affected by duality. It may therefore be said that he sits in the core of everyone's heart as a neutral witness of the causes and effects of one's activities, good and bad. We should also understand that Udasina, neutral, does not mean that he takes no action. Rather, it means that he is not personally affected. For example, a court judge is neutral when two opposing parties appear before him, but he still takes action as the case warrants. To become completely neutral, indifferent to material activities, we should simply seek shelter at the lotus feet of the supreme neutral person. Maharaj Chitraketu was advised that remaining neutral in such trying circumstances as the death of one's son is impossible. Nevertheless, since the Lord knows how to adjust everything, the best course is to depend upon Him and do one's duty in devotional service to the Lord. In all circumstances, one should be undisturbed by duality, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Karmanye vadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala hetur bhur mate sangho stva akarmani. Akarmani. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities and never be attached to not doing your duty. One should execute one's devotional duty, and for the results of one's action, one should depend upon the Supreme Personality of God.
Anything you would like to share, Megha Mataji?
Yeah, very interesting. I guess this just reminds me of one small clip by Radhanath Swami where he said the idea is not to be not to be sad because you're a soul. And he was giving this example of who was the Abhimanyu's mother? Forgetting the name. So
Uttara.
basically, Uttara, yeah. So when Uttara died, when Abhimanyu died, then Uttara was crying. It's not like, or like Arjuna also, like they were crying, but they turned towards Lord. So it's not like you should not be sad because you are unattached to anything, but you turn towards God. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So while you were reading and while Jagannath Gopal Prabhu was also speaking about Neti Neti, I was just thinking of a story which I wanted to share. Some of you may already know this because Srila Prabhupada has mentioned this story many times. So there was an old monk and a young monk who were going by the river. And at that time, there was a lady who said that actually she was drowning. She was drowning in the river. The young monk said, "Oh, I'm not going to touch Mataji." So he kept quiet. But the old monk immediately jumped into the river and he carried her back onto the banks. And immediately at that time, and then they started walking away, and then they started continuing on the journey. But after about 5 hours, the young monk was very disturbed. Actually, he was disturbed because how could the senior monk, who I thought was so advanced, how could he touch a Mataji and carry her on his shoulder and things like that? So after 5 hours of struggling, he finally asked, "How could you touch her? How could you hold her?" Then the old monk says something very profound. He said that I carried her for 5 minutes, but you have been carrying her for 5 hours in your mind. So it is not about the external, but it is very much about the internal. So I just wanted to mention this as the story came to my mind. Thank you. Does that make sense? Anything you want to add, Megha? Anybody else on this verse?
Thank you for sharing. No, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Let's move to the next one. Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu, text 12. So just before Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu speaks, as I was mentioning, the first two verses that we covered today are about the qualities of the living entity, and the verse that we just covered is about the qualities of the Supreme Lord himself. So it says he does not accept the happiness and distress that result from fruitive actions. He's completely independent of having to accept a material body, and because he has no material body, he is always neutral. So the qualities of the living entity are mentioned in the two previous verses, and now the quality of the Supreme Lord is mentioned. And now we will enter a different section, which Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu is going to start. Thank you, Prabhu. Please go ahead.
Thank you for summarizing that, bro. Shri Badarayani Ruvacha Ityudirya gato jivo gyatayastasya te tada vismita mumuchu shokam chitvatmasneha shunkhalam. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued, when the conditioned soul, Jiva, in the form of Maharaj Chitraketu's son, had spoken in this way and left, Chitraketu and the other relatives of the dead son were all astonished. Thus they cut off the shackles of their affection, which was due to their relationship with him, and gave up their lamentation.
Can you do the next verse also, Prabhu, please?
Yes. Nirutya gyatayo jnater deham kritvochita kriya tatyajurdushta jam sneham shokamoha bhayartidam. After the relatives had discharged their duties by performing the proper funeral ceremonies and burning the dead child's body, they gave up the affection that leads to illusion, lamentation, fear, and pain. Such affection is undoubtedly difficult to give up, but they gave it up very easily. This is again very interesting situation where, like, first Angira Muni and Narad Muni spoke about the futility of this material world and how the relation and our surrounding, everything is almost an illusion and temporary and will be destroyed. And then the kid comes to life and he spoke the philosophy. So it gives all the people around him, especially the parents who were like grieving and very sad because of the demise of the child, and then it gave them some enlightenment, that, as it seems from this verse, and then they were able to easily give up very easily. Such is affection is undoubtedly difficult to give up. It's Mama Maya Durataya. Krishna's Maya is very tough to cross over, but because of the mercy of Narad Muni, Angira Muni, and all the teachings they give, and he brought the kid also to life just to give them even more deeper understanding of the temporary nature of this material world. And then everyone was able to elevate themselves to the level that they could give up this false um, attachment and lamentation and fear and pain, and embrace the devotional service of the Lord. So it's this verse, it seems it's glorifying the greatness of the Acharya, that with their association uh, we can give up this illusion, lamentation, fear easily, even though it is very difficult, impossible to give up. That's what I think.
Beautiful, Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu. You talked about two things here, how Angira Muni and Narad Muni initially spoke about the philosophy, and along with that, now Harsha Shoka also spoke about the philosophy, and because of that, they were able to give up such affection very easily. So we should not be fearful when we are trying to give Krishna to others, or we should not be hesitant, because it is said very wonderfully that it's always 3 against 1, and you will never lose, it is said. When you try to give Krishna to others, even at our level, we will never lose. How is it 3 against 1? Because you want to give the philosophy, your Paramatma wants to give Krishna to others, and the Paramatma of the other soul, of the person that you're preaching to, also wants to hear the philosophy. So it's 3, and the only person who doesn't want it is that person that you're trying to preach to, at least initially. So that's why it's always 3 against 1. So whenever you're trying to give Krishna to others, please remember it's always 3 against 1. So you will always win. So I just wanted to mention that.
That is so amazing, Prabhu. 3 against 1. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu. Jagannath Gopal Prabhu. Text 14.
Yeah. बालघ्न्यो व्रीडितास्तत्र बालहत्या हतप्रभः बालहत्यावृतं चेरुर्ब्राह्मणैर्निरूपितं यमुनायां महाराज स्मरन्त्यो द्विजभाषितम्. Translation: Queen Kritadyuti's co-wives, who had poisoned the child, were very much ashamed, and they lost all their bodily luster. While lamenting, O king, they remembered the instruction of Angira and gave up their ambition to bear children. Following the directions of the Brahmanas, they went to the bank of the Yamuna, where they bathed and atoned for their sinful activities. In this verse, the word Balahatya, Hataprabha, is to be particularly noted. The practice of killing children has existed in human society for a long time, since time immemorial. But in the days of the yore, it was very rarely performed. At the present moment, however, in this age of Kali, abortion, killing of the child within the womb, has become very common, and sometimes a child is even killed after birth. If a woman performs such an abominable act, she gradually loses all her bodily luster. Balahatya Hataprabha. It is also to be noted that the ladies who had committed the sinful act of administering poison to the child were very much ashamed. And according to the directions of the Brahmanas, they had to undergo atonement for killing the child. Any woman who has ever performed such an infamously sinful act must atone for it. But no one now is doing that. Under the circumstances, the women responsible must suffer in this life and the next. Those who are sincere souls after hearing this incident should refrain from such child killing and should atone for their sinful activities by taking to Krishna consciousness very seriously. If one chants the Hare Krishna Mahamantra without offenses, all of one's sinful actions are surely atoned for immediately. But one should not commit such deeds again, for that is an offense. Yeah, this is a contentious topic, abortion. But one thing that is definitely there is abortion just for the sake of convenience is something that is not good and should definitely not be done. We can take corner cases and we can take, very edge cases, and but those are edge cases and we can't generalize them. And of course, it has a political aspect to it as well, where the right wing in the United States is a proponent of pro-life, and the left wing or the liberals, they are proponents of pro-choice, they call themselves. So pro-life and pro-choice. So it's definitely a contentious topic, but shastrically speaking, the I guess the way it is that the natural byproduct of sex is children, in many cases, and it is not right as per the shastras to enjoy but not take the responsibility that comes of the child. So, but again, that is a very high standard. In Kali Yuga, to follow that standard is very, very difficult. But the principle remains that a spirit soul who is there in the embryo and who is living, killing such an embryo just for the sake of convenience, that is something not right. And yeah, and I repeat, for the sake of convenience. As I said, there might be certain instances where abortion is a requirement, and it might it might. So, for instance, I'll give you a personal example. Although this is a contentious topic, I can tell you. So, my mother. So, I have an elder brother, and after my elder brother, I think just 2 years before I was born, my mother was pregnant with a girl child, and the doctors, they understood that there is some issue with the child, and the child will it's like it will anyway not survive or something like that. Even if it is delivered, might not survive or things like that. And they gave my father a choice, but the situation was that either it was my mom or the child. So that kind of a situation, like a do or die situation. So in that case, my father chose my mom. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would have done. But yeah, it's tough. It's a very, very tough situation. In such cases, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's justified, but then what else could my dad do, if I think of it, right? So there was no way. The doctors had just said that it's either my mom or the child who can survive, and something like that. There was some complicated situation. So yeah, definitely. So the principle is that killing the innocent is not warranted in shastras anywhere. Forget about, keep the Vedas aside. Even in normal morality, killing innocent, defenseless people is not warranted. It is considered horrendous. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, I liked how you ended, Proje. The essence or the principle is to not kill the innocent. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that and nicely summarizing this very controversial topic. Anybody else wants to share anything about this?
So, like, I would like to make few points or some questions, I may say.
Yeah.
So just so, like, in the case of Duryodhana, it comes in the Mahabharata that like after Duryodhana was born, there were like all the inauspicious omens, and Dhritarashtra was suggested to kill the child. So how about this? And for example, like as the Bhagavad Gita talks about the Varna Sankara, like the progeny, the unwanted progeny. So if some people are, so I mean, these are the some arguments that I heard from some people. That's why I'm mentioning that, since if like the baby is born by some affair outside of marriage, and the baby is gonna born, and it may not be raised in proper environment, parents are not in place, and it's like what we call as Varna Sankara in Bhagavad Gita. So, and in that case, they decided to take steps like that. So how we look at this, and I want to hear from all of you about this.
Jagannath Gopal Prabhu, you want to answer that?
So I I keep hearing these like watching these clips online where the pro-lifers give this argument that the systems in the country today are not good enough to take care of these kids who are born out of wedlock, and in many cases these kids end up becoming criminals when they grow up because of not having gotten that kind of upbringing. So better abort, right? Why do you want to raise criminals? So the response that the pro-lifers give is that then the solution to that is making the systems better. The solution to that is trying to give a good life to the child as much as possible. The solution to that is not killing the child and just finishing it off. I mean, the one argument that it made sense to me is that you cannot kill someone based on a probability. I mean, there are, let's say, 100 people in a room, and let's say there is a probability that some of them might go and commit a crime, right, or might do something wrong. So based on that probability, it doesn't make sense to kill, right? So that is what. So the solution to that is making the systems better. And this Varna Sankara is it's yeah, I mean, I don't have a clear-cut answer to that. But one thing I'll definitely say is that the path of bhakti, the path of Krishna consciousness, and the mercy of Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu is so magnanimous that even someone like a Varna Sankara can be easily transformed if they take to the process of Krishna consciousness. So this Varna Sankara thing, if you look at Arjuna's arguments also, that is there is no transcendence in his arguments when he makes in the first chapter. So, but when you include transcendence in the picture, then transcendence can so just like they say, the sun can with its heat can purify everything, like burn away all the impurities. Similarly, Krishna consciousness, bhakti, Krishna is like that bhakti can burn away all impurities, including the impurity of being a Varna Sankara. That is actually nothing for Bhakti Devi to burn up. So that aspect of transcendence is definitely we can consider that. And yeah, as I said, based on probability. Now, in case of Duryodhan, though, we have to see the foresight of these people. These were not ordinary sages who were there, and they were not also like child killers who took pleasure in killing the children. They were actually big well-wishers of the society, and they didn't want society to go in a awry direction. And that is the reason, from that standpoint, they said that Duryodhan should be killed, because he will go and he will grow up and cause havoc, which he did, which he actually did. I mean, so many attempts at the life of Pandavas, and so much envy, so much violence, and the whole Kurukshetra war also took place in one sense because of the obstinacy of Duryodhan, right? Because Krishna went as a peace messenger and he said, give me, give these 5 brothers just 5 villages, because they are Kshatriyas. It is in their nature to rule, right? So just give them 5 villages, at least that their inclination to rule will be fulfilled and they'll be happy. They'll not encroach upon any of your other lands. Duryodhan, just give them 5 villages. But Duryodhan said, no, get lost. I'll not even give them enough land for a needle to pass through. Something like that, he said. So then war was inevitable, right? And war was inevitable. Why? Because of the obstinacy of Duryodhan. In one sense, if you look at it, because Krishna wanted to settle it peacefully. He didn't want all the war and everything to happen. So, and then it's Mahabharat war is considered as the bloodiest war in the history of mankind. So millions and millions and millions of soldiers got killed in that. So yeah, with Duryodhan's case is a different one, I think. And yeah, but this Varna Sankara thing is from a dharma, artha, kama, moksha perspective, and we're keeping transcendence out of the picture. But if we bring in transcendence into the picture, the mercy, the grace aspect, then grace can transform anyone, even Varna Sankara. So yeah, that's what I feel, honestly. And yeah, and bhakti and coming closer to Krishna doesn't depend on any kind of previous qualification, including the previous qualification, whether one is a Varna Sankara, whether one is born and brought up in a very nice family, or anything in between. Anybody can take to bhakti and become great people, actually. Great people. So yeah, that's my take on that, Prabhu. I don't know. If I said something wrong, please forgive me. Others, please add.
No, Prabhu, this is perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu, are you satisfied?
Yes, Prabhu. Very beautifully said, Prabhu. Everything you said, yeah, it's makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Jai, thank you. Next, Megha, would you like to read?
Yes, I can read. So this one. Sa Itham Prati Buddhatma Chitraketur Dvijoktibi Grihantha Kupan Nishkranta Sarah Pankad Ivadripa. Thus enlightened by the instructions of the Brahmanas, Angira and Narada, King Chitraketu became fully aware of spiritual knowledge. As an elephant becomes free from a muddy reservoir of water, King Chitraketu came out of the dark well of family life.
Do you want to read just the translation of the next verse also, please?
Sure. The king bathed in the water of Yamuna, and according to prescribed duties, he offered oblations of water to the forefathers and demigods. Very gravely controlling his senses and mind, he then offered his respects and obeisances to the sons of Lord Brahma, Angira, and Narada.
Next one also.
Therefore, being very much pleased with Chitraketu, who was a self-controlled devotee and surrendered soul, Narada, the most powerful sage, spoke to him the following transcendental instructions.
So these are famous verses again. Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. Om Namastubhyam Bhagavate Vasudevaya Dhimahi Pradyumnaya Niruddhaya Namah Sankarshanaya Cha Namo Vijnana-matraya Paramananda-murtaye Atma Ramaya Shantaya Nivruttadvaita-drishtaye. Narada gave Chitraketu the following mantra: O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, who are addressed by the Omkara Pranava, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. O Lord Vasudev, I meditate upon you. O Lord Pradyumna, Lord Aniruddha, and Lord Sankarshan, I offer you my respectful obeisances. O reservoir of all spiritual potency, O supreme bliss, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are self-sufficient and most peaceful. O ultimate truth, one without a second, you are realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan, and are therefore the reservoir of all knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he is Pranava Sarva Vedeshu, the syllable Om in the Vedic mantras. In transcendental knowledge, the Lord is addressed as Pranava Omkar, which is a symbolic representation of the Lord in sound. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vasudeva, who is an expansion of Narayana, expand himself as Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshan. From Sankarshana comes a second Narayan expansion, and from this Narayan comes further expansions of Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Sankarshan, and Aniruddha. The Sankarshan in this group is the original cause of the three Purushas, namely Karanodakshai Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and Kshirodakshai Vishnu. Kshirodakshai Vishnu is situated in every universe in a special planet called Shvetadvip. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Andantarastha. The word Anda means this universe. Within this universe is a planet called Shvetadvip, where Kshirodakshai Vishnu is situated. From him come all the incarnations within this universe. As confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, all these forms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are Advaita, non-different, and they are also Achyuta, infallible. They do not fall down like the conditioned souls. The ordinary living entity is prone to falling into the clutches of Maya, but the Supreme Lord in his different incarnations and forms is Achyuta, infallible. Therefore, his body is different from the material body possessed by the conditioned soul. The word matra is explained in the Medini dictionary as follows. Matra karna vibhushayam vitte mane parichhade. The word matra is its different imports is used to indicate the decoration of the ear, position, respect, and the position of a covering, as stated in Bhagavad Gita. Matra sparshas kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkhadaha agamapayino nityas tam stitikshasva bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of the winter and summer seasons. They arise from the sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. In the conditioned state of life, the body is used as our dress, and as one needs different dresses during the summer and winter, we condition souls changing bodies according to our desires. However, because the body of the Supreme Lord is full of knowledge, it needs no covering. The idea that Krishna's body is like ours, in other words, that his body and soul are different, is a misunderstanding. There are no such differences for Krishna because his body is full of knowledge. Here we receive material bodies because of a lack of knowledge, but because Krishna, Vasudev, is full of knowledge, there is no difference between his body and his soul. Krishna remembers what he said 40 million years ago to the sun god, but an ordinary being cannot remember that he said the day before yesterday. This is the difference between Krishna's body and our body. Therefore, Lord is addressed as Vijnana Matraya Paramananda Murtaye. Because the Lord's body is full of knowledge, he always enjoys transcendental bliss. Indeed, his very form is Paramananda. This is confirmed in the Vedanta Sutra, Anandamayo Bhyasat. By nature, the Lord is Anandamaya. Whenever we see Krishna, he is always full of Ananda in all circumstances. No one can make him morose. Atma Ramaya, he does not need to search for external enjoyment because he is self-sufficient. Shantaya, he has no anxiety. One who has to seek pleasure from other sources is always full of anxiety. Karmis, Gyanis, and Yogis are full of anxiety because they want something, but a devotee does not want anything. He is simply satisfied in the service of the Lord who is fully blissful. Nivritta Dvaita Drishtaye. In our conditioned life, our bodies have different parts, but although Krishna apparently has different bodily parts, no part of his body is different from any other part. Krishna can see with his eyes and Krishna can see without his eyes. Therefore, in Shvetashvatar Upanishad, it is said, Pashyati achakshuhu. He can see with his hands and legs. He does not need a particular body part to perform a particular action. Angani yasya sakalendriya vrittimanti. He can do anything he desires with any part of his body, and therefore he is called Almighty. Rebol in this, I think this is very beautiful verse and even beautiful purport and translation. Srila Prabhupada is glorifying Krishna in all his majesty, and like explaining the principle of the quadruple, the first expansions of the Lord, and then how they expand into the three Narayana forms of Kshirodakshai Vishnu, Karnodakshai Vishnu, Garbhodakshai Vishnu, and how all these three forms of the Lord Narayana entered into the material world to bring it to life, and how Krishna's body is transcendental, and that's why how Jiva is different from Krishna. how material nature cannot touch Lord Shri Krishna. I remember in the Radhashtami class, Srila Prabhupada starts with saying that first you have to understand that Radha and Krishna are not ordinary boy and girl. They are Krishna is Supreme Personality of Godhead and Radharani is Krishna's Supreme Potency, Ladini Potency. So everything changes there. The interactions between them cannot be compared to the dealings between ordinary boy and girl, because they are Satchidanandama and everything is transcendental and should be looked from a transcendental perspective. So very beautiful purport and so many glories of Krishna explained here, I think. Yeah, I mean, Prabhu, you can also please.
Yeah.
Please.
So thank you so much, Prabhu, for so nicely reading the verse. So in this particular verse, in the 19th verse, 18 and 19 actually together, the qualities of the Lord are described and distinguishing the Lord from the living entity. So there are 5 different aspects in what Prabhuji just read. And so Vignana Matraya that means he's full of knowledge. That is the first one. And the second one is Paramananda Murte, full of transcendental bliss. That's the second one. And then Atma Ramaya, that means he's self-sufficient. He does not need to search for external enjoyment. And the fourth quality is Shantaya, free from disturbances. And the fifth quality, which Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu also mentioned, is Nivritta Dvaita Drishtaye. So that means whose vision turns away from duality. So that means he is not attached to the material world. So our acharyas explained that these are the 5 qualities of the Lord that are explained in this verse. So thank you, Vamshidhar Gopal Prabhu. Now we can read the next verse, which also further elaborates the distinction between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. Jagannath Gopal Prabhu. And this can be the last verse for today.
Just one sec, Prabhu.
Sure, Prabhu.
Sorry,
No
I
problem.
was eating something and I had stuffed my mouth with it. So
No problem.
yeah, talk about detachment from body. So verse 20. Atmanandanubhutyaiva न्यस्त शक्त्युर्मये नमः ऋषिकेशाय महते namaste nantamurtaye. Translation: perceiving your personal bliss, you are always transcendental to the waves of material nature. Therefore, my Lord, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. You are the supreme controller of the senses, and your expansions of form are unlimited. You are the greatest, and therefore I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Purport. This verse analytically differentiates the living entity from the Supreme Lord. The form of the Lord and the form of the conditioned soul are different because the Lord is always blissful, whereas the conditioned soul is always under the threefold miseries of the material world. The Supreme Lord is Satchidananda Vigraha. He derives Ananda, bliss, from his own self. The Lord's body is transcendental, spiritual, but because the conditioned soul has a material body, he has many bodily and mental troubles. The conditioned soul is always perturbed by attachment and detachment, whereas the Supreme Lord is always free from such dualities. The Lord is the supreme master of all the senses, whereas the conditioned soul is controlled by the senses. The Lord is the greatest, whereas the living entity is the smallest. The living entity is conditioned by the waves of material nature, but the Supreme Lord is transcendental to all actions and reactions. The expansions of the Supreme Lord's body are innumerable. Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam, but the conditioned soul is limited to only one form. From history, we learn that a conditioned soul, by mystic power, can sometimes expand into 8 forms, but the Lord's bodily expansions are unlimited. This means that the bodies of the Supreme Personality of Godhead have no beginning and no end, unlike the bodies of the living entities. So, yeah, the prayers continue here, and here, as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, the qualities of the spirit soul and the qualities of the Lord are differentiated here. And yeah, so even when the Lord appears in the material world, some people think that he is an ordinary person. So, like, he's born and, apparently he gets hit by an arrow on the leg and he dies and stuff like that. So, Prabhupada explains and the acharyas explain that that does not mean, the fact that these things happen does not mean that Krishna is bound by the laws. So it only means that Krishna is, in one sense, you know, dealing within the framework of his own laws, but that does not mean he is bound by them. So it's like, what is that example given? So, like, Prabhupada gives that example of what, that sandalwood, right? Sandalwood that grows on Malaya hills, right? So it's just that the sandalwood grows there. It happens to grow there, but that does not mean that only Malaya Hills has a monopoly over the sandalwood, right? Sandalwood can grow anywhere, but it just so happens that it grows there, something like that. So Prabhupada gives an example. So although it might seem that Krishna is behaving in a way that even, some recently, in that movie, this one, Kerala story, there is this point that, what are your God when his wife is kidnapped? First of all, he's powerless, and he's powerless in front of Ravana, who is coming and just taking his wife away, kidnapping her. He can't do anything, right? What? And then he's crying and, just roaming here and there, crying. And then same with Lord Shiva. He's taking the dead body of his wife and then he's just crying and, lamenting and things like that. So how can these people protect you? How can these gods protect you, right? This is the argument that's made. But then, yeah, I mean, the simple counter argument is that these things happening doesn't mean that the divinity of these people, these great souls, is in any way diminished. It just means that they are playing a particular role, and in that particular role, they are behaving that way. But when it comes to display of power, Ram did what was needed to be done, right? When it came to display of power, we know Lord Shiva drank the entire poison that came out of the churning of the ocean. So it's not that he's a weakling and, weak, powerless personality who, doesn't have any powers, and he's lamenting and crying and things like that. So, like that, yeah, we know that the Lord is unlimited and the living being is limited and conditioned, and whereas the Lord is aloof from beyond all conditionings. But sometimes the Lord plays the part of someone who is going through certain emotions that every one of us go through, and but we don't have to mistake that to be a limitation on the part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So yeah, that's all I could think.
Yeah, wonderful, Prabhu. Thank you. So nicely you brought up that point about the limitations of the living entity as compared to the limitations of the Supreme Lord. In fact, there are no limitations at all for the Supreme Lord.
Yeah.
So very nicely described with examples as well. So thank you so much. And I think we are at a right point to end today's session. Thank you all so much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
I'll stop the recording and